Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today on the Storytellers Stage, along with my panellist here, Sarah Ellis from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Ben Lumsden from the Epic Games. I was going to say Intel then, but you're not. But yeah, thanks for joining me here today. Today we'll be talking about this quite amazing experience, actually, the Tempest. For those of you fortunate to have experienced this live on stage, then wow, what a show. I haven't, and I think you're going to bring me a DVD along for me to experience that. I guess because we're on the Storytellers Stage today, I'd give you a little bit of a background on my little story. So many years ago, when I was about 5, a relation of mine drew a picture, and he drew a picture of a little boy against a tree, and I was fascinated by this picture. As I looked at this picture, I was fascinated that only through several crayons, the orange, the yellow, and the brown, how my relative had managed to somehow create the colour of skin. And I asked my relative, and I said, how have you done this? And she said, well, it's a technique that you use. You apply a little bit of the yellow, you apply a little bit of the red. And that then, from that day on, gave me the curiosity of technique and creativity, and then really enforced my future. I then went on to study fine art, through into graphic design, and then back in '96, I became art director of one of the big advertising agencies, Publicis, and then this thing called the internet came along, and I was fascinated by it. Fascinated not by the technology around it, but actually by the canvas it gave me, the ability to express creativity in many, many different ways beyond just TV or beyond print. It allowed to create much more of an interactive experience and create much more engaging content. So for me, it was this journey then that I continued on through the growth of digital and the development. I then went on to be digital creative director of many of the big, large advertising agencies, including Publicis, Lowe. And out of this journey, I continued with this fascination and this curiosity of art and science, technology and innovation. And as it says, you know, I've now set up my own innovation agency, an ideas and innovations agency, UnicornXP, really built on the convergence of the physical and the digital coming together to create these unique experiences. So when I got the phone call to be on the stage here today, chairing this panel, needless to say, given the subject, I was absolutely beside myself with excitement. So again, I welcome you all today, and I'm going to now pass you over to Sarah, who's going to give you a little insight on her life over at the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the Director of Digital Development at the Royal Shakespeare Company. My job is one of the first roles we've had at the company, and it's to look at how we reimagine Shakespeare for the digital age. It's about how we enable practitioners and people that make theatre to have new skills, new tools to make theatre, and look at all the tools which we can use to tell these stories again to an audience that have been coming to celebrate and enjoy Shakespeare's work for the last 400 years. So we really come from a perspective of theatre's always had a relationship with technology, whether that's candlelight, which basically moved the form forward, whether that's electricity, whether that's lighting. And now with these new technologies that are coming very rapidly into our space, how can we reimagine story? How can we look at virtual reality, augmented reality, but also the virtual realities that actually happen on those traditional stages, which are shared experiences and inspire people to come together around what we celebrate are those characters and themes that are still relevant today.
Ben?
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Can you hear Ben? No.
Hello, hello.
There we go, Ben. That's better with the...
I didn't think that the Madonna mic suited me anyway. So my name's Ben Lumsden, and I currently work for Epic Games. So as you can see by my heavily branded T-shirt, this is the Unreal Engine, which is the video game engine that we used on this project that we're going to talk about today, the Tempest. And my role there is to spread the word that the Unreal Engine is available for free for everybody in the media and entertainment space. So that's the area that I look after specifically, media and entertainment. Why would people who are in the media and entertainment space want to know about the Unreal Engine? Well, there's shows out there, TV shows, that are now rendered in a video game engine live. There are films that are being done in a video game live. We had our first feature film. It's sort of a Pixar-style Pakistani language feature film that was released 2 weeks ago in Pakistan that was rendered entirely in a video games engine, which is, again, like I say, a free software that we give away. But yeah, Sarah and I have been on this journey together for about 3 years now, where we collaborated in my former role at Imaginarium Studios, which is a motion capture services company, and we put together this fantastic product, which hopefully I think are we gonna run a video?
Yeah, we're going to show you now.
Guys.
For those who haven't seen it.
Do you have to do it?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Tempest Company, this is your part for the beginner's course.
3 years ago, we spotted that 2016 was going to be a big Shakespeare year. It was Shakespeare's 400th anniversary of his death, and the Royal Shakespeare Company needed to put on something pretty spectacular. We needed to try and match the magic of Shakespeare's imagination.
I got cast a long time ago for this new production of The Tempest, and the RSC is the home of Shakespeare. Not many actors get the chance to do things like this.
It's taken the best part of 2 years for us to develop this technology with Intel and create an avatar to make Ariel fly, to create a sense of the island being a place where magic was possible.
I boarded the King's ship. You get to see two fully fledged performances, one of which is an actor and another is this apparition can fly around the space.
To dive into the fire, to ride.
We have unlimited versions of Ariel. We're able to change his form in many different ways.
We are creating for the first time on stage, real-time, live facial performance capture, and that is quite an extraordinary leap forward.
I and my fellows are ministers of fate.
The actor both becomes the marionette and the puppeteer at the same time, and you can see their physicality completely driving one-to-one this digital character.
Men hang and drown.
We keep working, keep trying to refine the way that Ariel moves, the way he talks, and I have no idea where it's going to go.
The technology that Intel deployed here for the Tempest is big. Take real-time information from a motion capture suit, map that onto a complex digital avatar, and then project that digital avatar out through 27 projectors.
We have their desktop i7s to take marks, skeletal information, and a machine called the Big Beast, which has 120 cores.
I've never seen technical setup like this. This place is full of huge amounts of technology, much more so than most film sets that we're on. Generally, on set, you might say, let's fix that in post. You can't do that here. The avatar has to be so robust because that's the final product.
All you can do is create the play with the tools that you have now. And what's delightful about this production is that we have pretty spectacular tools.
Technology affords us is the ability to encapsulate Shakespeare's vision, inclusive of all that magic, that wonder.
The possibilities of what Intel have allowed are only limited by our imaginations.
We're at the forefront of something that other people can take on and build. Who knows where things will be taken in the future.
It's for other creative minds to see what we're doing and take it further.
So as you can see there, it's one hell of a truly immersive experience. For me, I think the magic in all of that is the use of old methods used in theatre from the Georgian and Victorian times. Old methods such as trapdoors, old methods such as that we use today with Pepper's Ghost, and combining those with real-time facial tracking, virtual reality, and also projection mapping, but projection mapping onto live objects. And I think it's these combined together that create this beautiful sort of merry dance of the most amazing experience. And like I said, the reason why I got so excited about this is because these sort of technologies I've been using and creating for storytelling and experiential campaigns for various brands. And these are used in isolation, things like the smart mirror and projection mapping and VR brand worlds. What's amazing about this is it's using all of these technologies in a live environment. And I think, for me, that's so brave. And it is so scary, but I think it's the brave and the scary which makes this thing such an amazing display and such an amazing experience, because it's about the collaborative approach of the Royal Shakespeare Company, Imaginarium, Epic Games, all coming together and working for, what was it 2 years' time? 3 years? You guys worked on this to create just such a fantastic experience. So like I say, today is a discussion, and we'll be chatting with the team and delving deeper into the process they went through, and also then inviting you guys in the audience through our lovely Glisser to send through questions you may have as well. So Sarah, this is a question for you. I mean, we know where the concept came from. It was born by the 400 years celebration of Shakespeare's death. But actually, given the concepts and given the delivering, given the technology that's involved, how did you conceive such a thing that wasn't one or the other? It was using innovation and technology.
So The Tempest is Shakespeare's last play. And it felt really fitting to have his last play at the end of that year of remembering him after 400th anniversary of his death. And in that play, it's one of the most magical, innovative, wonderful plays. It's not based on any history. It's not based on any. There's suggestion around real life events, but this is a play about a man that's come to the end of his life, that's stuck on an island, has been banished with his daughter, and it's about working out forgiveness, and it's about celebrating that and making amends with the world. And in the play, there are characters. There's a scene called The Mask, and in Shakespeare's day, these masks, not the masks you put on your face, but they were spectacles of technical innovation in Shakespeare's day. And we have documents that outline these events that were often commissioned by the king for millions of pounds, that were showcasing what designers could bring to the table, often for one night only. And you've got documents which talk about the audiences were all invited to wear mirrors and jewels so that it could reflect with the candlelight and make a scene. For me, that just really resonates with wearable technology today and just the sensibilities around that, or using growing roses and then wafting them in to create a sensory world. And I think that's so Greg really wanted to look at that particular scene in the play, and directors, it's a scene in the play that often gets cut, or it's problematic for directors. And he went, what would a digital mask look like? So from there, I went to where you go for ideas nowadays, which is the internet. And on YouTube, found a very small 2-minute YouTube clip of an Intel keynote at the CES in Vegas from 2013 called The Leviathan. And in that video, we saw, like this, a normal screen with a whale on it. And then Brian Krasnich, who's the CEO, went, but watch this. And on the YouTube clip, this whale came out over everyone's heads and came back in again. Now, on a YouTube clip, you know, that looks wonderful because it's basically augmented reality. You couldn't see it in the room unless you had some sort of screen. But I sent that to Greg, and he wrote back, "I want one." I didn't know anyone at Intel. I didn't know how to connect with them, so I went on their customer service website, web form, wrote them a very polite email saying, "We saw your 2-minute YouTube clip. We really love it. We're from the Royal Shakespeare Company. Would you like to come and have a chat with us about working together?" 2 weeks later, got a reply, and that started a wonderful collaboration that invited the Imaginarium in. So this is a collaboration that has absolutely been brought out of saying to someone, "I really, really love your work. It's really awesome. Let's work together." So that's how it came about.
Thank you very much. Only 2 weeks to get back to you.
I know, it's really, really good advertising.
I think had that have been me, I think that would have been 2 minutes
Yeah.
to get back to you.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
So Ben, on the collaborative side, I mean, it's been stated that there's a real combination of, there clearly is some of the most amazing tech in this. And obviously, as I mentioned, some old school sort of physical trickery with stage doors and smokes and mirrors. And so with that, was it a give and take on both sides? How did that sort of education work? Because again, in my experience of, certainly when we're coming up with campaigns that you do want to use technology, you've got to have a good understanding of the boundaries of what technology is available. So again, how did that sort of process work with regards to give and take?
Sure. So there were huge technical challenges behind the whole thing, but there was a massive give and take and a real collaborative spirit with us, Imaginarium, and with Sarah and her team at the Royal Shakespeare Company, trying to understand our different roles in this. So at Imaginarium, we come from a world where we are doing visual effects for video games and films, feature films such as Star Wars and that sort of thing. And it's all character-based, and always our mandate is trying to get the best possible character and performance on the day, but then you have 10 months in post-production. So there's always this possibility to fix everything in post-production. So we had to build a trust to understand that we were going to be completely out of our comfort zone, the RSC were going to be completely out of their comfort zone, and it was in that sort of melting pot, I think, that the really interesting things happened. So it was a 2-year process of research and development where we had great workshopping. It was really important to workshop with Greg, the director, Stephen, the designer, the various actors who helped us all the way through the way, and like I said, with the give and take, we said to Greg, well, if you want a physical likeness within the avatar from the performer, then you need to cast the performer early. So we cast Mark as Ariel about 8 months prior to the performance, which is really early for the RSC, in order that we could scan him and get his physiognomy represented within the character, within the avatar. But always, everything that we did came back to the creative. So Greg, as the director, was really insistent that there was never any technology for technology's sake. You know, it was really important that it was beautiful, and as I hope you'll agree from the video, you know, it was really visually stunning, and we were doing some beautiful aesthetics there, but the key was that it had to come from the text, and there had to be a creative impetus for the avatar even existing. Why should an avatar exist as Ariel to talk to Prospero? Well, we came up with a whole bunch of different constructs around that. So if Ariel is telling Prospero a story, well, he can relay the story by sort of casting his avatar onto a screen and say that he's boarding the king's ship, and say the ship, I put fire all over the king's ship, and then we can represent that visually, but it had to always come back to the text. So
how did those sort of conversations come about? Were they you would literally, you'd have a workshop on it, or you'd go back to the script and then you'd apply your technology ideas, or was it just
it was a continuous loop. It really was. It had to be. And so we had, with Prospero and Ariel, because that's the key relationship, we had workshop days with Simon Russell Beale, who played Prospero, and Mark Quartley, who played Ariel. They came into Imaginarium in Ealing a couple of times at various, 2 months 2 months prior, 4 months prior, 6 months prior, you know, in order to make sure that we were on the right track. And then in and amongst that, we were doing a whole bunch of R&D ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, really. You know, one of my big questions is because of the time scale on this, how you actually kept up with the technology, and with new technology, you know, evolving and developing. Did it render some of the earlier work obsolete?
Well, at some point you just have to say, okay, this is our cutoff. This is our technology cutoff. So
Yeah.
we made that about 6 months prior to the show, in order that we could know that we would be able to put as many fail-safes in there as necessary. So we didn't have any breakages within our system. So we were rendering it all in Unreal. We were doing the skeletal retarget. That's where you have the Mark as the actor, as the source skeleton, essentially, and retargeting that to Ariel, his skeleton. That retargeting process was in a software called Motion Builder. And then the motion capture system itself driving his body was an Xsense inertial motion capture system. So we got those pieces of the puzzle right pretty early on. It was an interesting conversation, actually, just to decide where was Ariel going to be as a performer. For the longest time, we thought we were going to have only an avatar on stage, and that Mark, as the performer, would be backstage in the wings in what would be a really technically controlled environment, so that we would use optical cameras for motion capture, which is an array of cameras in a room, which is something that we knew and was tested. But again, it came back to the creative, and not having Mark on stage, the physical actor, to be able to interact with Prospero, the physical actor, it didn't make any creative sense. And so we ended up going with this inertial system. And the inertial system, we had to put a bunch of extra fail-safes in, but that was a body-worn motion capture system.
So that's how you manage the dialogue between the avatars, if you like, and the actors?
Yeah.
Well, it's just, I mean, what's good about theatre is it's quite irreverent about the technology, and what I mean by that is you have an actor that's one of the most brilliant technologies out there, and then you have a story. So in terms of the motion capture technology, we were trying to find a very, very sort of accessible language around that, and it's really puppetry. It's just a new form of puppetry in that way, and that's how we addressed it. And that was really helpful when we were bringing what I would call very new technologies, but it's not only that, it's new people into this space, and you have, one of the important processes is that you have to converge what technologies you are currently working with those new technologies to make those big pieces. So it was really important that our lighting and sound desks were also taking in the video feed. There was a huge amount of work there, but also we had to make sense of these technologies for theatre. So we weren't making a film, we weren't making a TV programme, we were making a piece of theatre. So those sorts of tests are really important, because as soon as you put that work in front of an audience, they will know. They are, you know, we shouldn't assume that our audiences aren't an intelligent, critical mass, that if you haven't thought about that in your R&D or your rehearsal process, it's going to come out on stage somehow. So those were the important parts to it, is that why were we using motion capture? What did this mean? What's the language around that? And how could we get the creatives to get excited by these tools? But also use them differently, actually, didn't we? It changed. When you were looking at the design, we didn't need the detail because our projection surfaces were 40 foot high, being flown in and out, so we didn't need the detail, but what we needed was the latency. This was a show that was happening for 3 hours, 8 shows a week. We needed it to be robust, and it couldn't fail in a live environment. So those were our criteria for these technologies, which would be slightly different to other industries.
So with that, with the technologies, with, you know, this is a live performance, and you've got so much technology there that, you know, each one's relying on the other. What would you say the pain points were within that?
Loads.
The technology pain points.
Pain points.
I think
projection.
I think the key was, as Sarah's just alluded to, getting the different systems to talk to each other. So in order for us to take our technology into the theatrical space, we needed to do quite a lot of work. I'm back. Yeah, we had to do quite a lot of work on making sure that the Unreal Engine could could be an additional video feed on the lighting board. So, so it was news to me, actually. For live events, generally, video is driven by what's called a Grand MA, which is essentially a lighting desk. Some of you guys may be more familiar with this than I certainly was 3 years ago, because so essentially, yeah, all the video feeds are driven by these analog faders in what looks a little bit like a sound desk. And this protocol is called DMX, a DMX protocol, in order to be able to fade these various different video feeds in, move them around all of the different projection surfaces. And so we had to do quite a lot of integration to make sure that the Unreal Engine could talk to the lighting board, and to make essentially what would be as pain-free a technical rehearsal as possible. So again, coming from a world of film and visual effects, we weren't used to the technical get-in. And in theatre, the technical get-in, generally you get a week, if you're lucky, in order to put the stage up, mark it up, make sure that the lights are all on the right spots. But meanwhile, the actors actually want to be doing the show as well. So there's a lot of give and take. And so we had to make sure that we were robust enough that all of our systems were completely integrated into the Royal Shakespeare Company's video unit and their lighting unit, so they were driving all the technology. So if Greg, the director, or Stephen, the designer, said, hey, I want Ariel to fly from screen left to the middle screen to the middle cone, and then I want him to fly off to the gods, then that wasn't anything that we were there to make sure that that could happen, but we'd done all of the groundwork prior to that. So essentially that was all controlled by an analog fader on this lighting desk on the Grand MA. So that was exactly as the same conversation that Greg would have had with any of the video team to say, hey, I want this piece of video content to go from that screen to over there. It just happened that he was able to say, hey, I want Ariel to fly from this screen to that screen. And again, it was literally just an analog fader to do the rotation of the character on any different axis, or to change Ariel's form. So we had all of the different variations of the character. So going from, in the video, you saw a blue mushy, we called him affectionately, and you saw the harpy. So all of these different states and colors and different visual effects that you essentially had live, they were all puppeteered by analog faders. And that was the key thing, was the pain point was doing all of that work ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then the other pain point was the 27 projectors in the space, because so you have
for the projection mapping.
For the projection mapping, because you have this wonderful technology pipeline, and you're like, how is that going to be seen? And making sure that, going to the theatre, it's an amplifier, so it amplifies sound. So most of the time, the audience needs to be really silent, and you don't really want a revved up projector going in a really, really sensitive moment. So that was a massive headache and a massive challenge, and the technical design department were making covers and such like, and hiding projectors in the scenery, and also then you have the motion capture, optical tracking cameras all around the space. And that's the thing, it's about when the technology becomes invisible, and that's okay to make the story happen. And that looking at, when you see those YouTube clips that look wonderful around all the mapping and such like, there's so many things you're not knowing in a live environment, those challenges are, and ultimately noise and audiences, human beings being in that space, changing the environment, changing the temperature, adapting that were things that we had to consider, and that our criteria were, if it couldn't work in that live environment, we couldn't have that happen, and that is quite difficult when you're pushing new technologies into a space and wanting to see their potential. You have to be kind and have a moment where you go, is this technology ready yet? So there were a lot of 50% and a lot of 80% that may not have been in that show.
That was going to be my next question, actually. What was the outtake? Because often things don't make the final cut, and how many did?
Well, originally we were hoping that we were going to have facial real time throughout the whole thing.
Right.
So that was the one that got away. So for me, I was really pushing this facial real time. So what you saw there was body puppetry, apart from on the harpy on the video. You might have seen when Mark was waving his arms, and you saw the big grotesque bird man called a harpy. When that was being puppeteered, he was also puppeteering the harpy's face. And in motion capture, that's the sort of the holy grail at the moment, is to get facial real time. So we can get body real time. So essentially you can have a magic mirror where, you know, your various stars, for instance, on Lupita Nyong'o playing Maz in Star Wars, will go up to herself on set and she'll see herself as Maz Kanata, the character, and she can decide how to get into character, how her character should move. That's body real time. That's kind of an established given now. But facial real time, we were really pushing, and that was the one that got away because of the video latency. We would have had to stream the video over Wi-Fi or stream coordinates over Wi-Fi, and the latency was just too much. That was the biggest single issue. Always for me, it's always audio. To be able to marry the audio and the video, you know, if you want to drive a real-time avatar facially, then you've got to have lip sync. Otherwise, there's no point. Everyone just goes, huh? That's wrong.
And with this, Sarah, actually, more to you, actually, do you think audiences are sort of driving this forward? Do you think this is going to create a greater demand for this sort of experience, this more immersive experience as we move forward within theatre?
I think certainly audiences are way more comfortable, and it's in everyone's. I think some of the things are more day-to-day than we realise. So, but I think from our perspective, I think it's always down to what story do you want to tell, and what it's always led by the director and how they want to tell it. So, for example, we got a lot of questions around, so is this the end of, you know, traditional theatre? And we were like, absolutely not. You know, we're magpies, and what we do is we just build more ways of telling those stories. So I think what I loved about, so I saw most of the shows in Stratford, and I covered quite obsessively at 10 o'clock at night after a show had finished, went on social media to see what people were saying and asked different audiences. And one of the things I really am very proud of in this production is that our core audiences got the ambition, got the scale, respected the technology. They came in with the Shakespeare and they left with the technology. But what I really loved is the younger audience that came in with the technology. So that messaging and that language really resonated with a younger audience. But when you asked them what their favourite bit was, they said, oh, the Stefano and Trinculo drinking scenes. There is no technology in that scene. And what I loved is that they got the story and they got the Shakespeare. Now, if we can do that and not create a new disenfranchised voice of an audience over here, but welcome in generations of audiences into a space together to have a shared experience, absolutely, and they walk away feeling, having been transformed, that for me is a really good thing. And however any practitioners, any theatre makers, any artists or any audiences want to take this technology forward, that's a really good thing. But from our perspective, we'll be led by what the stories are.
What the stories, yeah.
Yeah, traditionally the RSC audience in Stratford is sort of 60 plus, isn't it?
Yeah.
But for this show, it was a lot younger. It was really great.
And with that audience, then, what was the storytelling before the live show? You know, what did the audience know to expect? Were they ready for this? Was it? Was it completely unique to them?
Well, there was a lot of naysayers, weren't there, amongst sort of the Blue Rinse Brigade in Stratford until they saw the show.
Yeah.
People are resistant to change.
But there's a huge rigor around that work, and so there's a huge audience that know that work really well, and so it's really important that you maintain that quality in how you do that. I really liked, I mean, we talked about the shows, we would talk about most shows and bring that audience in. What I really liked is that we did do a Snapchat filter one day, didn't we, with Ariel's face, and that was an experiment for us. And it was a nice convergence of the creative with the campaign. And in one day in the UK only, we reached 7.5 million people aerialising their face. And I really liked that playfulness, and I really wanted to bring that out more, as how can we bring people into the world of that play. You know, that's a new thing for us in that way.
Who uses Snapchat anymore, though?
Who uses it's dead, isn't it? Have I was so behind. But I suppose we had a lot of press interest, obviously, around the collaboration, what we were doing. But really, it really was about the audience, actually, more importantly.
I think for me as well is the challenge is always to, you've always got to focus on the creative output. It's got to be about what that experience is. And I think the challenge is how you neutralize the technology that's used within that.
But I think it's also important, like when we were in tech and it was new for everyone, there was a moment, and you talk about firsts on stage a lot. There's a lot of talk about the shiny, did the shiny thing. But there's really important thing about those quiet firsts, those firsts that maybe no one will see, or there were 100 firsts backstage, and there was a moment where we were in tech and it's really long hours, it's really hard, people are really focused, and they were all willing that production to go on. And yet, basically, members of the workshops just sat in the circle, just watching. And Pete, the production manager, went, "You're done now, the shift's over." And they went, "No, we're just watching." Because we were watching something special and they were invested. And then another lady from Wigs and Makeup was just sat there and she just went, "This is really special. I remember the first time we brought a gobo light into the theatre about 30 years ago, and this feels to me like the same thing." Brilliant. And it's having that respect from those practitioners that are crafts people, that innovate every day behind the scenes, that don't talk about their innovation, that are constantly iterating their craft. That to me was knowing that those technologies were embedding meaningfully, and that it's up to them to take it forward.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing at the moment is with innovation and the journey now creatives are going on. We're almost developing hybrids, if you like, who have a good understanding of both, but are leading with the technology. I've just been given a call on the minutes, so we've got we invited the audience actually to ask some questions. So we've just got a few that have come in. Bear me a second. So I'm just going to read through these. In the video use of motion capture, please can you talk about the process? I love motion capture.
That's you.
Over to you.
Talk about the process.
Yeah, the process of motion capture.
Yeah, okay, so it was a lot of fun. So essentially, Mark had to put on a suit. We like I said, we were using inertial motion capture, which is accelerometers, 17 accelerometers integrated into his costume, and that was a very specific design request, so that we didn't have to have retroreflective tape. So in some of the behind the scenes, you may have seen Mark in standard motion capture what we call optical markers, which are retroreflective tape, so that near infrared light hits the tape and goes back into the array of cameras, which can then identify where that point is in 3D space. And in that you might have 60 markers in order to then say, okay, that cluster of markers we identify as Mark, and we can fit some bones into it and make a virtual mark. But we used 17 accelerometers, and one for each limb, essentially. And then in the XN software, this inertial software, you have to define the lengths of all of those bones. So you take measurements of the actor, and you measure all of the limbs. And then, like I said before, you have a virtual mark that you're driving and that you're puppeteering, and then you stream that to your virtual puppet. So, as Sarah said, it is sort of it's puppeteering, and you're this process of skeletal retargeting, where you are taking Mark's bones and you're retargeting them to Ariel's bones, and then on that Ariel puppet, this virtual Ariel avatar that is virtual bones, you can hang any kind of avatar you want on that skeleton. And so you can make that skeleton look any which way that you want. Does that sort of answer the question?
I think it does, yeah. Well, it leads on to the next question, actually, which is more focused around, from the initial discussions, how does one go about budgeting this? So ultimately, assessing affordability.
Creatively.
We were very lucky that we had a decent budget and decent time. I mean, with these sorts of projects, you never get enough time or enough money, but we were blessed, actually, for this one.
Yeah.
We also had we put very strict parameters around the R&D, so the R&D had to test whether something was possible before we were able to take it forward. And I had to work really closely with the technical teams to absolutely understand what were hard costs, what were soft costs, and we all invested. So the money going, if it's all about the money, then you lose something, I think. And you could have added layers upon layers of budget, but I don't think you would have got a better piece, if that makes any sense. So it's really important to put edges around it. But we certainly wouldn't have been able to do it on our existing, processes.
So bravery existed throughout the entire camp, really, all the way through to the financial director.
And to Sarah's point, there's a lot of heart there. So at Imaginarium, we had a desire to push motion capture forward into various different realms. Andy Serkis, whose company it is, he comes from a theatrical background and he wants to push performance capture in the world. So he was so excited by it. We jumped at the opportunity. And yes, of course, we did it for a decent budget because we absolutely wanted to do it. But the physicality of sitting down and running the numbers on something like this that you've never done before, you just have to make your best guess. You say, well, I think it's going to take. We put 5 guys on it for 2 years, so that's a number right there that you can. That was sort of. From our initial assessment at Imaginarium, for our component part of this, we said, okay, we're going to need 2 years of a 5-man team on it for 2 years, and then we brought in up to sort of 30 of us at various different times as well. So we were able to run the numbers by man days, I suppose, person days.
I think that you have this huge pressure. We want to do something that's never been done before. How do you budget that then? There's sort of like crystal balling that going on there, but you have to make some sensible decisions within that. Also, you need to be fluid. So if an opportunity comes up where the cost goes away, there'll be another cost that comes in. And you've got to be, I think, not too onerous around that and actually enable the people that are working and delivering this to not feel that pressure. You take that pressure on a bit, but what your job as producer is to watch the room, read the room, see what's on rails, see what's not on rails, and make sure that you're future thinking the questions. But I think the R&D is really helpful because then you start honing in. But what's always difficult if someone's thinking about what their invoice is before the idea, and that, I think on theatre, actually it's quite a fluid space, so you sort of co-design that and then you work out what resource you need to put around it.
I think it's important to say actually that the costs for all of this sort of stuff are coming down exponentially as costs with more for computing come down all the time. The inertial motion capture suits, we had a couple and they were 25k plus each, but now you can get a similar technology. There's a couple. There's one called Rococo. There's one called Perception Neuron, which come in. They're now $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 for that sort of technology. Yeah. So all of these costs are coming down. I think we broke the back of this with the R&D that we did, but then actually to do something like this again,
I was just about to say that,
a fraction of the cost.
So with the cost coming down and the more collaborative approach to how we do these things, do you think this is going to open it up then to become, it's amazing that the Royal Shakespeare Company have put this together, but I think, as you say, they've opened the doors now for maybe the possibility of producing theatre shows that are solely around this, that are just completely immersive experiences in their own right.
Oh yeah, I think
because of the cost.
Yeah, and I think people are already doing that. There's a lot of white space, designs, but I think that our brief to Imaginarium was always that we needed to do this ourselves. So I don't think it's just about the technology. We've enabled a bunch of theatre production staff to know how to use this technology, and that has a huge value to the organisation. We're a subsidised company, and we're an institution, and we have to have a strong responsibility, which we want to have, around sharing the skills and the learnings in the sector. And we'll be launching a report in the next few weeks about collaboration and what we learnt. And also we're an open door, so if theatre practitioners or anyone wants to come and have a conversation with us, it's in our interest to share that. So I think that the technology's going down, but actually it's about the ubiquitous nature of making the work and not making it this cold, do you know what I mean, only I, specialist, only I can do that. Because that's going to make a much more interesting array of work as well. Yeah. I mean, it'd be such a shame just to do it in one way.
And platform for the rest of us moving forward.
Yeah.
As you say, either big, small, or whatever sort of genre of creativity we're doing.
We did it our way, but I'd love to see other makers do it their way and celebrate that.
Okay, I'm conscious of time because I think we've pretty much come to an end of this discussion. So a round of applause as well thank you very much, Ben and Sarah, for sharing with us your brilliant plan. And thanks to the audience too.